where it gets tricky. But let's bring it down to small business e-commerce for a second, right? Or maybe a little bit more than a second. Um, let's say, like when you talk to a client who they've got very unique problems, right? So let's start with that. So I think most of the stuff you read online happens to be examples with very well-known companies. You notice how there are stories like how Google improved their conversion rate by changing the color of a button.
Yeah, yeah.
How Amazon did X, Y, and Z because of all the data they had. But one thing for sure is that these guys are just machines at collecting data and analyzing it and doing, making very good business decisions based on that. But when you bring it down to a small business, you have, I think, a host of problems. One is, I guess you have unreliable data. You also have data that uh, that may not be like collected correctly, things like that, and then blah 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 blah. Um, where would you start? Where if someone's listening in and they've got a Shopify store, or they've got some basic Google Analytics set up, how would you walk through a client like that in terms of things that they should be thinking about right now?
Yes, yeah, yeah. I do quite a few work with startups, and I think startups and small business are can
Sure.
be very synonymous. Startups might just be a fancier word. I would say, I would start by figuring out what's there already.
Mm-hmm.
I think by far and large for small businesses, they don't have to, and they shouldn't spend a lot of time setting up fancy tools, which I think is an issue I see with very small companies. They want to be like the big guys, so
Right.
they create a stack that's very complex, but they only have a very small amount of data.
Mm.
E-commerce is interesting to me because you can actually have a lot of data out of the box, as you mentioned, which is good and bad. But Shopify gives you a lot of data out of the box.
Yeah.
You could easily connect that with Google Analytics and get even more data. So you have something there. So figuring out what's there already, and then try to find the low hanging fruit. So in this case, we might be looking at let's say your existing customer base, and trying to figure out who are the best customers. Let's say who are the top 10% or the bottom 10%, who's buying more than others. And this can be done with small amounts of data. You don't need to be looking at 1 million customers. You could be looking at 500 or maybe a few hundred, and try to find the attributes that make up these best customers. Maybe they happen to be female, of a certain age range, or even a certain country, or certain location, or maybe certain products.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the sort of the 80-20 analysis that you might hear can be done with small amounts of data. Based on that, so start figure out where you are, find some of the low hanging fruit, the top customers, bottom customers, or the whales, as sometimes they might get called in e-commerce. And then I would figure out the top issues in the site.
Mm-hmm.
So this might be conversion issues where people are again hung up, maybe technical issues, and work through those issues. Not to do a full website redesign, which might
But
be
how
kind
would
of
you find those issues? So, let's just walk through what you just said. I think that's really important, right? So, firstly, you're saying look at the customers and try to
yeah.
segment them, right? Like find the really high spenders, maybe these segments, and then I guess where you're going with this is find the customers that are the most valuable to you, and then try to see how I can make the next segment be more like them, right? Like what
Yeah.
can I do in the site, right? I guess that's where you're going with it. So now I've got this list. So I know, I don't know, A, B, C, D, E are my quote unquote whales, and they spend a lot of money with me. What do I do with that information?
Yeah. So now that information could be used in a few different ways. It could be a source for, let's say, a Facebook marketing retargeting audience
Mm-hmm.
for your ads. If you're running ads, it could be a research source where you're not gonna try to find other marketing sources that are full of those customers. And of course, it could be a source for further communication. So being able to send email communication
Yeah.
ongoing can be sent to those customers to encourage them to keep buying, and maybe even as a fourth option, as a way to develop new products. So maybe you're thinking of coming up with new products or subscriptions. Those are probably going to be the customers you actually want to get feedback from, because those are the ones you want them to buy and you want more of them.
Absolutely. I mean, just coming back to your third point, one of the things I was thinking about when you said look at problems in your site, I guess you could also email them and say, hey, like, was there something you didn't like about our site that you want us to improve, right? Is there any other thing that you've seen people do to it? The reason I'm going with this is that I think this is a topic that's near and dear to a lot of small business e-commerce owners. They're constantly trying to see, how do I make my site better?
Yeah.
How do I make it convert better? So, I think talking to the whales, so to speak, is a great point. Have you seen any other tactics where people get some good advice on how to improve things?
Yeah, yeah. And this can be an endless rabbit hole, right? Because you could be
Right.
improving things forever, and you maybe get to the point of that Google story where you're trying different shades of blue. But I think for smaller
Basically, like, well
businesses,
done if you're getting to that point, right?
yeah, 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 that's you're at a different level. But really, I think and I have a few e-commerce clients.
Yeah.
Probably the most useful report that we have is really just a funnel, right?
Mhm.
And we're able to see the drop off from step to step, from viewing the product to adding to cart and checking out and so on. And we're just working through where the biggest drop offs. Is it at the initial stages, from
Amazing.
viewing the product to that, or is it maybe down the funnel when they're going to add the credit cards? And then working through some of the best practices, a secure site, a consistent experience, things like that. But we're still focused on the funnel itself, and that's what's guiding us. That's,
Right.
I think, what the bulk of the issues are. Eventually, again, you can go and find more specific things on how you display products and how you provide social proof and things like that. But the funnel is where I've seen that most of my e-commerce clients focus. And again, this might come from Google Analytics or Shopify, but it just shows you how users are moving through that drop off, and then what things maybe you can insert, right? Maybe you have retargeting for people who drop off halfway through the funnel, or if you ever heard of like cart abandonment, this is
Yeah.
roughly what they come in, right?